McGraw-Hill Ascent Audio presents Get Funded, the Startup Entrepreneur's Guide to Seriously Successful Fundraising, by John Biggs and Eric Villines. Narrated by B.J. Harrison. Publisher's note: this audiobook refers to figures and tables included in the print and e-book editions of the book. Introduction. This book is about building businesses. There are plenty of books about creating a lean startup and building the perfect product, but there are no books that will provide you with a step-by-step guide on how to choose the best funding strategy, pitch investors, and build the perfect deck, as well as tell you how to avoid the most common pitfalls that often kill new businesses. At the outset, we'd like to state the obvious. Creating a successful, cash-positive business requires a lot of work, a lot of luck, and a lot of passion. Yet even if all the stars align, even if you have the greatest idea of all time, the chance of your business not getting funded or even failing is very high. We should know. Between us, we have built 10 businesses and made or raised $30 million. I, John, have written about more than 8,000 small businesses for TechCrunch, many of which followed the traditional funding model and lived or died by their bank accounts. I, Eric, have spent more than 20 years working with entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 executives on go-to-market strategies, as well as preparing them for public speaking, media interviews, investor meetings, and more. According to research firm Fundera, 20% of small businesses fail in the very first year. What is the number one reason these businesses fail? Almost half of all startups close up before they are ever able to find a viable market for their product or service. In the beginning, the primary source of most cash flow is going to be through funding. But if the business runs out of funding before it can begin making its own positive cash flow, then everything will stop. This is why many people will tell you that starting a business is crazy. But if you are anything like us, or the many entrepreneurs we know, then you probably have an idea that you are truly passionate about. You want to do something amazing, something useful, something that might just change the world, or perhaps a small corner of the world in which you live. And there is not a damn thing that's going to stop you. If this is how you feel, then please keep listening. So yes, starting a business takes heaps of work, a lot of luck, and passion, but it also takes funding. How to think about startup funding. When we say funding, we mean any money that keeps a business alive. This money can come in any of a bewildering variety of forms from myriad sources, subject to a vast number of considerations. There's debt, there's equity, there are angels and VCs and convertible notes. There are dilutions and valuations and crowdsourcing and initial crypto coin offerings. There are rounds and raises, Series A, Series B, Series XYZ, venture debt, and Small Business Administration, or SBA loans. Not to mention the perennial favorite friends and family cash. If you don't come to this process with a strong background in startup speak, it can seem overwhelming. Two things are certain. Every source of funding comes with strings attached, explicitly or implicitly. And if a deal sounds too good to be true, it is. Get funded the right way, and, with a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, your business will prosper, You'll prosper, and your investors will too. Get funded the wrong way, and you may lose it all. Far too often, founders either watch their businesses fail or thrive from the sidelines after their investor friends have pushed them out the door. So, how do you navigate this maze? We've got you covered. How to think about startup investors. We can't emphasize enough how critical it is to understand investors, who come in as many varieties as businesses do. Only when you understand what motivates them, what they're looking for, what they have to offer, what your rights are when dealing with them, and what their rights are when it comes to you and your business, only then can you determine what kind of funding model is best for you. Every investment is a transaction. That means that both parties give something and both parties get something. Even if your mother gives you a wad of cash with no strings attached, it would be prudent to assume that there are strings of the invisible kind. That is, don't spend it all at the track. When dealing with other kinds of investors, you may need to be especially vigilant about looking for those invisible strings. That doesn't mean you should go into the process with fear in your heart, wary of everyone you meet. It just means you always need to be thinking in terms of a transaction. What am I giving up? What am I getting? What is my investor giving up? What are they getting? Make sure you know the answers to these questions before you sign on the dotted line. There are many types of investors, with many motivations and expectations. Some investors need to know only that the founders are smart, highly motivated, and full of integrity. Others will need to see a detailed prospectus with budgets and contingency plans for your first 5 years of operation. Depending on your circumstances, either one of these might be the best fit for your business. It goes without saying that if they're investing in your startup, they've got a propensity for risk-taking. A very high percentage of startups fail, and when they do, investors get nothing. All competent investors know this. Investors who are risk-averse buy treasury notes or municipal bonds, not stakes in startups out to change the world. But just because investors know there's a good chance they'll lose the money they invest in you, doesn't mean that they don't want to write a check. It's your job first to do all the preparation necessary to increase your odds of success, and second, to explain exactly how and why your new business is going to beat the odds and succeed. We'll make sure you know what your investor wants and needs to know, and we'll teach you how to communicate clearly. How to determine the right funding model for your business. Too many first-time founders stumble into their financing. This is understandable. If you're starting, say, a business selling gourmet ice cream that you make in your kitchen and sell from a tricycle, like Peter Angevine, co-founder of the successful Little Baby's Ice Cream, you may be, understandably, more concerned with the chemistry of ice cream, food safety regulations, and bicycle maintenance than you are with debt-to-equity ratios. But if your business takes off like a rocket ship, and we hope it does, it would be better to have given some thought to those ratios. Otherwise, you may find yourself in what entrepreneur Keith Teare calls the startup valley of death, at the very threshold of success without a dollar in the bank. In that situation, you may take the first deal that comes along and wind up losing everything you have built. Here are the steps we recommend before signing any agreement and taking any money from any investor. Make sure you understand your options. Decide what you're willing to give up for investment. Choose the kind of investor you want. Devise scenarios from best case to worst case. Find potential investors and talk with them without pitching them for money. Run your plan by disinterested third parties whom you trust. Decide what's best for you and your business. Design a timetable that will allow you to raise as much money as possible to support your goals. All of these bullet points lead to one simple activity. We want you to think about your bank balance. If you're not thinking about your funding strategy and how it's connected to your business, you're going to lose. How to get funded and hopefully prosper. One of the complaints we've heard from first-time founders is that it's hard, nearly impossible, to even find the people who might be willing to invest in you. TV shows like Shark Tank and Hollywood movies push the narrative that finding an investor for your young business, no matter how wonderfully it's managed or how brilliant its strategy, is a magical event that turns your life around, and the investor is a fairy godmother waving a wand of money. In our experience, that's just not true. The problem, often, is that there's a mismatch between the story you're telling and the kind of potential investor you're telling it to. Early investors don't want to hear a pitch suited for institutional investors looking for a later funding opportunity, and vice versa. Giving the wrong pitch only communicates that you don't really know what you're doing, which, we hardly need to say, is not the impression you want to give people when you're asking them for money. Preparing your story. Everyone's heard of the elevator pitch, a narrative about your startup that's so pithy, persuasive, and short that you could tell it to someone over the course of a typical ride in an elevator and win them over. We agree that you need an elevator pitch, and we'll show you how to craft yours. But an elevator pitch isn't going to get you a check for $1 million. For that, you need a story that has a little more meat on its bones. It's important to understand that human beings everywhere are wired to respond to stories. You can't just throw facts and figures at people and expect them to be blown away. You need to tie everything together in a way that has forward movement and emotional power. We'll teach you how to do that. Delivering your pitch. Some startup founders come from an engineering background. Some come from product development or the IT department. Some were line chefs who made it big. Others were history majors who lucked into a financial job. In other words, you may not have much experience delivering a pitch tailored for each audience you address, answering questions which may be forceful, on the fly, or dealing with the inevitable rejection you'll encounter. For some, making the pitch is one of the scariest parts of being a founder. But it doesn't have to be. We'll tell you exactly how to prepare and practice so that you become completely at ease. Learning to listen. Communication is a two-way street. You need to be open to what the market is telling you. We don't mean how to give people the impression that you're listening when you're really planning your next step. No. We mean you really need to develop the capacity to accept feedback, especially from people who like much of what you have to say, but tell you no anyway. Believe us, we speak from experience. Closing the deal. Okay, you've found an investor, made your pitch, perhaps several times, gone over preliminaries. You may even have a handshake deal. But always remember the old expression, a deal isn't done until the ink is dry. What are those final finishing touches you need to move from agreement in principle to money in the bank? Let's explore. Building to win. Building a business is hard. It's not for everyone. As an entrepreneur, you are the captain of your own ship. You will look at working for others differently. You will understand how to act decisively and without malice or confusion. And you will also come to appreciate the freedom of building your own business in a very real sense. No one can take that away from you. In fact, you may become spoiled. The entrepreneurial life is very exciting, and the up and down thrill of building, failing, and building again is addictive. And within that lies another problem. Your failures will probably outnumber your successes. What happens then is a deeply dangerous period of self-doubt. Entrepreneurs are often highly ambitious and are used to winning. Odds are that you will lose, and perhaps lose spectacularly. The end game for the entrepreneur is growth. It's change. It's a refusal to give up. It's also an understanding that your idea might not be good enough, that being an entrepreneur won't make you enough cash to survive, and is therefore a drain. And you might break yourself, or something you love, to try to meet your goal. The entrepreneur's ultimate goal is to fix something that's broken. All great businesses start with that premise. If you're building something just to make money, or if your expectations are out of whack, you will ultimately lose. In a sense, this whole book is a meditation on that idea. By learning to think clearly about funding, you will learn to think more deeply and more clearly about your goals and dreams, about why you're starting a business in the first place. How to listen to this book. Too many businesses fail because they lack financial resources. There is a vital difference between financial resources and material resources. You can have an enviable collection of comic books to sell, a warehouse full of hamburger buns, or a complete set of dog grooming tools. If you want to grow past a single-person business, you need financial resources to put those material resources to work. Getting funded shouldn't be just an afterthought. It should be your first thought, even as you sling your first comics at a flea market, fry up your first burgers for friends, or shave your first Shih Tzu. To do more, you need financial resources. This book is about how to get those resources as quickly and as painlessly as possible. This book is broken into 3 parts. Part 1, Startup Funding Basics, contains an overview of the types of funding available to founders of new businesses and explains key concepts such as valuation and dilution that you need to understand before you decide on a strategy. Part 2, Finding the Right Funding Model for Your Business, explains the criteria you should use and the process you should follow to devise your preferred funding plan. Part 3, Communicating Your Story, contains a series of exercises that will help you better pitch your story to investors. This includes the terrifying startup monster, the pitch, as well as basic advice most seasoned entrepreneurs had wished they had known before starting their businesses. Let's get started. Part 1, Startup Funding Basics. The goal of an early-stage startup is to survive and become an actual business. Many founders believe that getting funded is the primary goal. It's not. The founder's real goal is to create a business that makes money for herself and her investors. There are many competing views on when to raise startup funding, but most investors won't look at a project until it is a real, cash flow positive business. In Part 1, we'll explore everything you need to understand regarding funding. Chapter 1. What is a startup? A startup is a small business with global ambitions. This is the simplest way to describe anything from a taco truck to a software as a solution, SaaS, service for e-commerce funnel growth. If you're building a business, your goal should be to grow it as big as possible. But this doesn't mean every hot dog stand has to be part of an organization that is as big as McDonald's. Your goal is to find a blend of value, quality, and growth that allows you and your business to thrive. Some businesses will hit the Goldilocks point where everything is just right, but not much is growing. But at some point, fundraising may become an important part of growth. An entrepreneur is a scientist. Your goal is to test a hypothesis. Your app or restaurant or store is a hypothesis testing machine. You think that people will want what you are selling. In order to test this hypothesis, you must be as pragmatic as possible and produce results that prove, without a doubt, that you are on the right track. First, the bad news. Startups fail. A lot. Before discussing funding, it makes sense to explore some of the statistics associated with startups. According to Small Business Trends, a bit more than half of all startups actually survive to their 4th year, while the startup failure rate at 4 years is about 44%. Fast forward 2 more years, and 56% of startups have failed. Statisticians estimate that 90% of all startups ultimately fail, which means they don't stick around to gather growth funding, go global, or get bought. Some startups barely get past the domain name registration stage. Many won't make it off the ketchup-stained napkin after a brainstorm. And even more die in our heads as we get more and more frustrated by the realities of building a business. Startups fail all the time, and often it's no one's fault. Timing, trendiness, and luck often factor into the failure of a business as much as skill, experience, and cash. The original Ben & Jerry hit a wall trying to sell ice cream in the middle of a Vermont winter, a decidedly inauspicious way to begin. They began their business in May 1978 with $12,000 in seed money. They sold ice cream during the summer, but the business suffered from October to February. Faced with failure, they created Free Cone Day the next May to remind their summer customers why they loved the brand in the first place. The result? A huge uptick in sales all summer, and, thanks to the founder's very unusual ice cream making style, people kept coming back for the shop's secret sauce. In fact, Ben & Jerry's succeeded only because one founder, Ben Cohen, had severe agnosia. That meant he had no sense of smell and nearly no ability to taste food. Because of this, he found texture to be of the utmost importance, and he discovered how to mix huge chunks of chocolate or fruit into the ice cream in order to satisfy himself. In an era when it was far easier and cheaper to mix in syrups or tiny pieces of chocolate, Ben & Jerry's was a mouth-watering experience. But if they had not nearly failed during their first winter and learned from that experience, they would never have succeeded. Why things fail. According to Small Business Trends, the top 10 causes of small business failures are, in order of prevalence, the following. 1. Lack of product-to-market fit. 2. Running out of cash. 3. Team problems. 4. Competition. 5. Pricing and/or cost issues. 6. User experience problems. 7. No business model. 8. Poor marketing. 9. Bad customer communication. 10. Market timing. Product and/or market fit, as we see, is the most important part of a business. Product and/or market fit happens when what you've built is in heavy demand. Ben & Jerry's owned one of the few ice cream parlors in Burlington, Vermont. This meant that their audience, hungry college students, was almost captive. Now imagine the same situation in a place like New York or Chicago. Not quite the same. In Burlington, the product and/or market fit was local, and then, when the rest of the world discovered the value of their ice cream, the product and/or market fit went global. Finally, 40% of small businesses are profitable, 30% break even, and 30% lose money over time. Often entrepreneurs keep going long after it's time to quit. We're offering this list not to scare you, but to create realistic expectations. Ignoring the serious challenges that await you is a plan for failure. You and your team must be extremely vigilant to avoid any of the pitfalls we mentioned as you move through the process of building your business. Not everyone can be a Michael Dell, who started his global empire by hand-building computers in his garage, which eventually led to his building a billion-dollar company. The truth is that the early-stage visionary with the big idea isn't always the right person to run the day-to-day aspects of a business. Investors aren't going to look at just your strengths. They're also going to determine whether you can see your own blind spots. Our goal is to help you see those blind spots before anyone else does. The good news. Now that we've brought you down with the scary statistics, we have some really good news. You're an entrepreneur. That's amazing! You are building a startup. You have a great idea, the will to create something, and an understanding of your market that no one else has. You have the guts to take risks, to hunt down capital, and to build something people want to use. And you are experiencing the deep joy that comes with creating something bigger than yourself. Sure, not all of this might be true yet, but let us assure you, it will be. Eventually, you're going to look back and appreciate these efforts in a unique and joyful way, and you'll be happy you took the risks. Look at the flip side of the most pessimistic statistic we offered. If 90% of startups fail, then 10% of startups survive. Of course, the odds are against you, so what? You have a fighting chance of making something that you can be proud of. Further, remember the simple adage, we learn from failure. Even if you don't break through to the other side, your experience is invaluable. The bottom line is that you should think of building your business as a continuum. Perhaps your first idea wasn't quite the winner. Your next one will be better, and your next one, and your next one after that.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?